The Darkest Time by Becky Henry. BJU Press, Reading for I Met You in a Story, 2nd edition. In the year 1861, when Abraham Lincoln was president, our country began the most terrible war of its history. Every other war that we have ever entered has been against another country. But this time, states that were part of the same country fought against each other. This terrible conflict was called the War Between the States, or the American Civil War. Problems began because the people of the North and the people of the South lived in different ways. They believed different things, and each side thought the other was wrong. They tried to take care of their differences in peaceful ways, but the problems were too serious. To some people, war seemed to be the only solution. No other war in the United States history has created such bitterness. Sometimes even brothers sincerely believed differently from each other and fought on opposite sides of the same battle. The war between the states tore apart families and friends. It was one of the darkest times in our nation's history. Abraham Lincoln was the man the Lord gave us to lead our country through that bleak time. He had patience, compassion, a gentle sense of humor, and a real love for his country. After years of toil and heartache, he led the nation to the end of the war. How thankful Mr. Lincoln was then! But only 5 days later, the president was shot and killed. He did not live to see his beloved states become one strong nation again. When President Lincoln died, many people in the North and some people in the South grieved over his death. Today, people in both the North and the South remember him as one of the greatest presidents this country has ever had. He guided our nation through its darkest time, and in the end, he brought it to a better light. Abraham Lincoln Was My Friend by Keith W. Jennison, illustrated by Mary Ann Lum. Billy Brown and Abraham Lincoln were neighbors in Springfield, Illinois. When Mr. Lincoln became the President of the United States and went to Washington, Billy stayed behind. Each day he eagerly read the newspaper for news of his good friend Abe. He read about the war and learned that some people blamed Mr. Lincoln because it lasted so long. He read that each day the president saw dozens of people and that he helped them whenever he could. Billy often wished he could do something for his old friend. In 1864, Billy Brown made a trip to Washington to see the president. Billy tells of his visit with the president when Mr. Lincoln was staying at home very near a battlefield. I footed it up to the soldiers' home where Mr. Lincoln was living then, right among the sick soldiers in their tents. There was lots of people setting around in a little room waiting for him. A door opened, and out came little John Nicolay. I went up to him and said, "How'd you do, John? Where's Mr. Lincoln?" "Have you an appointment with Mr. Lincoln?" he says. "No, sir, I ain't, and it ain't necessary. You just trot along, Johnny, and tell him Billy Brown's here, and see what he says." In about 2 minutes the door popped open, and out came Abe Lincoln, his face all lit up. He saw me first thing, and shook my hand, fit to kill. "Billy," he says, "come right in. You're going to stay to supper with Mary and me." He had a right smart lot of people to see, but as soon as he was through, we went out on the back stoop and talked and talked and talked. I told him about everybody in Springfield, the weddings, the births, the funerals, and the buildings. I guess there wasn't a yarn I'd heard in the last 3.5 years that I didn't spin for him. Laugh? You'd ought to have heard him laugh. It just did my heart good, for I could see what they'd been doing to him. He always was a thin man, but he was thinner than ever now, and his face was drawn and gray. It was enough to make you cry. Well, we had supper, and then we talked some more. About 10 o'clock I started to leave. "Billy," he says, "what did you come for?" "I came to see you, Abe." "But you haven't asked me for anything, Billy. What did you want me to do for you?" "Nothing, Abe. I just wanted to see you. I felt kind of lonesome, 'cause it had been a long time since I'd seen you. I was afraid I'd forget some of those yarns if I didn't see you soon." Well, sir, you should have seen his face when he looked at me. "Billy Brown," he said slow-like, "do you mean to tell me that you came all the way from Springfield, Illinois, just to visit with me? You don't have any complaints in your pocket or advice up your sleeve?" "Yes, sir," I says. "That's about it. Why, I'd go to Europe to see you, if I couldn't do it no other way, Abe." Well, sir, I was never so astonished in all my life. He just grabbed my hand and shook it, nearly off, and the tears just poured down his face. "Billy," he says, "you'll never know just what good you've done me. I'm homesick, Billy, just plumb homesick, and it seems as if this war will never be over. Many a night I can see the boys dying on the fields, and I can hear their mothers crying for them at home. And I can't help it, Billy. I have to send them down there. We've got to save the Union, Billy. We've got to." Billy Brown returned to Springfield. After a while the war ended, and the nation rejoiced. Billy never saw his friend Abe Lincoln again. Billy tells how he got the news of Mr. Lincoln's death. "I tell you, it was a great day out here, when we heard Lee surrendered. Somehow the only thing I could think of was how glad Mr. Lincoln would be. Me and Ma reckoned he'd come right out and make us a visit and get rested, so we began right off making plans about the reception we'd give him. A brass band, parades, speeches, fireworks, everything. Seems as if I couldn't think of anything else. I was coming out to the open store one morning, and all the way down I was thinking how I'd decorate the windows and how I'd tie a flag onto that old chair. Then I saw Hiram Jones coming toward me. He looked so old and all bent over that I didn't know what happened. "Hiram," I said, "what's the matter? Be you sick?" "Billy," he says. He could hardly say it. "Billy, they've killed Mr. Lincoln." Well, I just turned cold all over. And then I flared up. "Hiram Jones, you're lying. You're crazy. How dare you tell me that? It ain't so." "Don't, Billy," he says. "Don't go on so. I ain't lying. It's so. He never came back, Billy. He's dead." And he fell to sobbing out loud right there in the street. Somehow, all I could think about was all those yarns I'd saved up. Now I'd never get to tell them to him. I'd never get to see him resting out in the old rocking chair and see that smile on his face. But Ma stopped me from that selfish foolishness. "Don't look like that, Billy," she says. "He saved the Union. That was his job. He saved the Union, Billy." And I knew it was true. He had done what he had been sent to do.